What's going on, guys? It's YouTube Live with the Suits channel.
Woohoo!
Robbie Wheaton from Wheaton Arms. We really appreciate him. 20 years experience as a gunsmith. Makes incredible aftermarket Glock parts. Go to wheatonarms.com. And we're talking about triggers later, but the Wheaton Arms flat face trigger for a Glock is the best on the market. I had to finagle him to get me one for my Glock 29. And he came through. Now, one thing I'll just tell you, they're getting ready to put some up.
Yep.
About 100. They'll be gone in a hurry. So just keep your eye out. Also does custom gun work. And so just a great asset for us here at the Suits compound. Also, Sarah Mack, we appreciate her for being over monitoring the comments. We will be taking some questions, but they're going to be limited, and they're going to have to be really good questions because we have a lot to talk about today. So first things first is Sportsman's Guide. We really appreciate their sponsorship for today's episode or escapades. And Sportsman's Guide gives $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Suits. SOOTCH, no 00, no SCOTCH, whatever, Scooch, none of that. Just SOOTCH, and you get $20 off.
And I tell you, you got to sign up for their Buyers Club. You sign up for the Buyers Club, you get free shipping on everything that you order. You start ordering big, bulky items, and the Buyers Club will just about pay for itself on your first order with the big, bulky items and shipping.
And we have used it extensively. It really comes in handy with the jerry cans, with the big 50-gallon drums, all that kind of stuff.
Did you bring the magazine today?
No, I didn't. And they have a great magazine. But the fact is Sportsman's Guide, we really appreciate it, but we have been buying, and I personally and Robbie buy off Sportsman's Guide on a regular basis. So we love, that's why we really like Sportsman's Guide. A lot of surplus, but they do everything. So anyway, we really appreciate Sportsman's Guide. Okay, today we've got a couple things we're going to talk about. Now, in the title, it says, why is it so important to train? We're also going to look about midway at a couple of the bills that are coming up, the gun control bills that are in the House, and then we're going to talk about triggers. We're going to talk about the importance of a good trigger. So first thing first is training. Training is a big deal. I just did an interview with Hillsdale College supporting their shooting team.
That's right. And
Hillsdale College, if you don't know, they are a really incredible institution that stands for the Constitution, for conservative values, for character. And it's just Larry Arnn, who's the president there, is just an incredible spokesman for traditional American values. They have just signed on a deal with USA Shooting to become the home of the Olympic U.S. shooting team. And so we had an interview with Ashley Carroll, who is a world champion shotgunner, and in fact just won 2019 world champion.
Yep.
And it was really fun. That video is on getzone.com, or will be on getzone.com, the whole interview. And I'm sure they'll want us to put it over on the Suits channel. So watch for that. But one of the big things that I took away, and really what inspired me today to talk about training, is the regimen that they go through to achieve excellence. And so first off, Robbie actually has trained me. Is that why I shoot so good or shoot so bad? I don't know.
It depends on the day.
When I miss the target, it's Robbie's fault.
All my fault.
But it's training is vital, and this is not training. I mean, this is great. This is practice. This is going out and shooting. But going out to the range and setting up a target is not training. That is practice. And so it's really vital to have someone to be able to analyze what you do. I took martial arts for 20 years. And, I could watch martial arts on YouTube and learn.
Oh, yeah.
Learn. Just like I've done with a lot of gun techniques. I've learned a lot with the gun techniques, different things. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But martial arts, I can sit there and look, and I can think I'm doing it right. But you need an instructor to tell you, hey, you need to put that foot out a little bit more. You need to lean in a little bit. You need to get your stance right, and they can critique you. And so when it comes to firearms training, it's really great to have someone.
It is, absolutely. And there's one of the things that you can look at doing if you don't have an instructor or someone that can critique you, is use a video camera when you go to the range. You can watch other people, world-class athletes shoot, watch what they do, how they do it. Go to the range and shoot and videotape yourself shooting. And then you can come back home and you can watch the video of yourself shooting and compare that to how a world-class athlete shoots, and start making some changes to your own shooting style based off of what they're doing, as far as their grip, their stance, where their weight is positioned, if they're weight forward, weight neutral, weight backward, where their weight's positioned, how they grip the gun, whether they grip it hard with their strong hand, their weak hand, if they've got a neutral grip, their arm position, the pistol in relation to their eyes, their elbow position. That's a huge one that a lot of people don't think about. Sure. Is your elbow position. A lot of people, new shooters especially, their arms are locked out, really rigid. And what that does is creates a lot of tension in your shoulders, in your arms, and it makes the front sight just twitch like this. So when you relax and bring your arms back in a little bit, and you've got a nice bend in your elbows, then the sight settles down because you lose all of that tension in your shoulders.
But that requires recoil management, with your firearm and with your hand. It was really funny. I just did a review on the Walther PDP, which is a brand new pistol with the Walther, and it's optics ready. And one of the things that they learned while they were developing this handgun, because they have special forces that are out testing them ahead of time. And one of the things the guy told them that was a big takeaway is that when you bring your grip in, especially if you have an optic on your handgun, when you bring your grip up, a lot of times people have a hard time finding it. If they just tighten up their pinky, it'll bring it right into line. Mm-hmm. Something very simple like that. Now, Mike Glover over at American Contingency or Fieldcraft Survival, he talked one time about proper grip. And one of the things that I really took away from his video, which he did an excellent job, and he's a special forces guy, I mean, he's had a lot of experience, is that he said, take the gun and push it down into your hand.
That's right.
He goes, just push it down. And he goes, then all of a sudden you've got this solid grip. I see so many people shooting and they'll have a gap between
the back of
rear.
The beaver tail.
Mm-hmm. Now see, I see that and I can say, hey, you need to do that. We just trained about 8 ladies down here at the house. I say train. We brought them down to shoot. I gave them proper grip placement on their firearm. I talked to them about their shoulder width apart, their stance. When I first started shooting, this was so funny. I didn't know. I just was out shooting. I just went to the range, and a buddy of mine was with me, and I was standing back like this, and I was shooting with my back kind of back. And he said, now this was 35 years ago, and he said, hey, push your back forward. He said, bring your back in. And so that's what I started shooting, and that little tip has helped me. With Robbie, he likes to shoot isosceles. So he'll stand up straight and he goes boom, 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 boom. Robbie's a big guy. Robbie's got a good grip on his pistol. For me, I like to bring it in and shoot in like this. And, it's more of a modified Weaver stance or something, so there are different techniques. You have to find the technique that works for you.
And I tell you what, I always try and tell people when I'm working with a new shooter or someone that's wanting to change their shooting style is if you play golf, a golf stance is a great shooting stance. It's called a modern or modified isosceles. So your feet are about shoulder width apart. Your weight's forward upon the balls of your toes. If you take your golf stance, hold your arms down like your golf stance, and then bring your arms straight up, that's the position that you want your arms in. Elbows slightly bent.
Right.
Grip on the gun. You want about 70% of your gripping strength to be with your support hand, and only about 30% with your weak hand. One way that you can tell if you're gripping the gun too hard with your strong hand is wiggle your thumb. If you can't wiggle your thumb or you feel a lot of tension in your thumb, that means you're over gripping the gun. What that also does, if you're over gripping the gun, it's difficult to pull the trigger fast because you've got all of this tension in your hand. So your hand's not relaxed to where you can pull the trigger fast.
But see, part of that is because you're using the wrong hand.
Well, I can use either hand. I can use either hand. I figured if the camera's reversed and I'm holding up this hand, it looks like my right hand. Anyway.
That's true enough. That's true enough.
But you want to be really relaxed with your dominant hand, whether it's your right or your left hand, because that relaxed hand will allow you to pull the trigger faster. You're not going to be wiggling with the sights because you're not over gripping the gun. There's just a lot of benefits to it. And then that strong grip with your support hand allows the sights on the pistol to track straight up and straight back down.
Right.
Versus gripping it really hard with your dominant hand, the sights are going to tend to drift up and to the right
Right.
and back down and not drop back down in the notch. They won't be lined back up.
Well, now one thing too, I found out with grip that, over the years, in fact, John Lovell has done some good things. He's a great trainer. But one of the things is when I use that support hand, I manage the recoil with it.
Mm-hmm.
So while the gun is coming up like this, if I pull my hand in and hold the leverage on that, it actually keeps the gun shooting flatter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing a lot of that. So first is really the optimum is to go to a really good class.
Yes.
And have some instruction. You'll take away a lot of things from that class because you'll have an instructor that says, hey, you need to do this. You need to change this. You may not even know that you're doing it.
That's right.
And so that's one thing. Secondly is when you're at home is a lot of dry fire training.
I'm a huge
Learning
proponent of dry fire training and then also airsoft training.
Yes.
A lot of guys don't think about that, but you can get an airsoft that is designed, and an airsoft is like a BB gun that shoots these little ceramic plastic BBs. You can get these airsoft guns that are an exact copy of your particular firearm that you carry.
Right.
And they'll shoot around 300 or so foot per second, but you can get them at the slide cycle. So you get a little bit of simulated recoil with them. The sight's moving when the gun's firing. And they are a great training tool, especially right now with the difficulty of ammunition and the expense of ammunition. The airsofts are a great training alternative. And then you go to the range and you shoot a little bit with your, 940, 45, whatever caliber is your choice. You go to the range and shoot a little bit with that just to get used to the different recoil impulse and the recoil control. But you can minimize your range training with your carry firearm by maximizing your training time with your airsoft and dry fire practice.
Yeah, that's one thing too is, a lot of people, they'll say, well, like 22 is another one if you can find 22 at this point. But, the thing is you're practicing your manipulations. Yes, you're not getting the recoil, and you definitely need to be firing your handgun quite a bit, your defensive handgun. But it lets you realize the trigger because you're not anticipating recoil, and you're able to kind of really on the fundamentals, just kind of get that solid.
That's right. Solid grip, stance, sight alignment, trigger control, all of your basic fundamentals. Where's the safety? Am I manually manipulating the safety every time? Am I gripping the gun high enough to deactivate the grip safety every time if your firearm has it? But all of the little manipulations that you do with a firearm, the dry fire training or airsoft training is going to allow you to reinforce that skill to where it's a subconscious skill at that point.
Yeah, shooting is a lot like golf.
Yep.
As far as the mental part of it, it's more mental than it is physical. There's definitely physical involved, but it's more mental. So, that's one thing about, being able to know the different drills, messing around with your firearm and knowing, okay, this is what I'm doing, tap, rack, when you have a malfunction, knowing how to deal with malfunction.
That's right.
One thing we used to do at one training class that I used to go to a lot, the South Carolina Gun School, we did a lot with those guys. And one of the big things is we'd put a dummy round while you were loading. You just take a dummy round, put it in there. You wouldn't think about where you put it. And so when you're shooting, all of a sudden click, and then you immediately go through the drill to clear it. And so those kind of things help. Now, again, you can do some of those at home or at the range, but a lot of times when you're in an indoor range, they won't let you draw from the hip. They won't let you do different things.
You can be kind of limited.
So, you have to do what you have to do, but that's where dry fire training, and then that's where going to a class and having training is important. Okay, so we're going to kind of open it up for a minute here and have some questions. If we have a couple, do we have any? Do we have a lot of? Okay. Sarah Mack says that we don't really have questions specific to this, and that's what we're kind of looking for. One thing that we did early on, the video's still up, is when Robbie, we went and I just said, I want you to do, because he does a lot of gun training. And so I said, go through it with me, an experienced shooter. And there were a lot of things that I took away from that. And so it's very important, that you put those things together. So training. One of the things that I did, again, take away from the Hillsdale College deal, the interview, was them talking about the mental aspects, making sure that, they're mentally aligned, they're doing things right. It was really funny. A buddy of mine came down here. I don't think he'd ever shot before. He bought a little 22 and the ammunition that he had for it was a Walther P22. And I told him, I said, sometimes they can be a little finicky with ammo. I've got some CCI mini mags, and he brought some Federal just bulk ammo, and he did. He'd shoot it and he'd jam, and I let him do that for 2 magazines, just shoot. And then because when he first picked the gun up, he was like doing that. He was real nervous. He was just kind of nervous. He didn't know, it's an unknown. And so once he started manipulating the firearm, dropping the magazine, extracting the round or rechambering, by the time he got to the mini mags, he was proficient. I mean, he was getting good. And then he started getting kind of calmed down. He got comfortable with it. And so when you're taking new shooters out, make sure their grip's right. Make sure they keep their finger out of the trigger, all those basics, and that'll go a long way. Okay, so great. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next subject. And guys, if you do have questions, feel free to jump in. But we do have some gun control coming up in the House. We just want to talk about it. They're pretty straightforward. We have HR 8, which is for transfers. In fact, you can't have a private sale. Like for Robbie, I couldn't say, hey, Robbie, you got this gun, give me $400, and we make a change. We'd have to go to an FFL and make the transfer to leave a paper trail. And really, the only way that's going to work is to have national registration.
That's right.
Because they don't go through and they're not supposed to. It's illegal for the ATF to keep registration or a list of firearms. But the way they've set up the 4473s now, the firearm's right at the top and your name's right there, and they can track that stuff. So the big thing is it's an invasion of privacy, and it's also just an invasion of freedom. So if I want to sell a gun to my brother-in-law and I sell it to him, I know he's a good guy. I know he's not going to do anything with it. Maybe it's like a few years ago, there was a friend of mine who was going through a divorce, and she was afraid for her life. Her husband had a gun and kind of had threatened her. And so I gave her a gun to borrow for a time period. And so with this, we would have to go to an FFL, do the transfer. And then when she gave it back to me, because she bought a gun, so I would have let her keep it. But she went and bought a gun later on. Then she gave me the gun back. We'd have to go to have it transferred again. And so that's HR 8. And, again, guys, we've got to stop these little bills right now. Here's the thing. If we can stop these that, according to the Democrats, are, this safe gun measures or, whatever they're calling it, these common sense gun measures. If we can stop these infringements now, it's going to be much more difficult for them to ramp it up, because they will. The second one is HR 1446, which is an enhanced waiting period, or so it goes from just 3 days. If you go into a gun shop, you tell us about it, Robbie.
So like right now, if you go to buy a firearm in South Carolina and a lot of other states, if you have a concealed weapons permit, you can go in, you buy the firearm, you give them your driver's license, your concealed weapons permit, fill out the 4473, pay whatever your transfer fee is or the cost of the firearm, and you take the firearm home with you right then.
Right.
Some states already have a waiting period in place to where you have to wait 3 to 7 or maybe 10 or even 14 days, depending on the state. But in most states, if you go in to buy a firearm, you can buy it and walk out the same day with a concealed weapons permit. If you don't have a concealed weapons permit, you fill out the 4473. The person working there, they call the FBI, and the FBI does a background check on you. And if everything comes back clear, they approve you. You take your firearm home that day. Or they can, if there's something like you have a common name like John Smith, a lot of times you'll get delayed because there's a lot of John Smiths and they want to make sure that they're doing the background check on the correct one. So you can get delayed for, was it 3 business days?
3 business days.
Yep. So you can get delayed for up to 3 business days. But after 3 business days, if the FBI hasn't contacted the dealer, then the dealer at their discretion can still go ahead and give you the firearm. And then the FBI has 30 days at that point to where they can complete their investigation. And if you have already given them the firearm and something comes up with it, then they'll retrieve the firearm. They being either the ATF or the FBI will retrieve the firearm from that person if they're prohibited from owning it. But with what they're looking at now with this new enhanced background check, it's going to be, what is it, 7 days?
10 days.
10 days.
And then if they want, they can extend it. So
Right.
Let's say they go 10 days and they say, you know what, there's something we don't like here. And then they want to extend it. I know a guy.
Or maybe they're just busy,
Right.
and they're busy processing a lot of background checks like they have been.
Right.
And because they are busy, they extend it 10 days and they still haven't got around to it. So they extend you another 10 days. So now you're 20 days out on being able to buy your firearm.
And they can do it indefinitely. And
They
that's the other part. And, you know, the thing is, Robbie's right. There's a lot of background checks that are going through right now. So there are some delays. Here's the thing. If you marry these two together, what's going to happen is you're going to try to transfer a gun to someone, and then they've got to wait their 10 days, and then, you know, up to 10 days. And then you got another 10, you know, they may be in trouble, just like that young girl that I gave that gun to. I mean, she was a law-abiding citizen. I've known her for years, so I was more than happy to help out. And I knew her husband too, and he was a little bit of a. But the problem is then she has to wait.
Yeah.
And so, you know, these kind of things, even though it's kind of like, well, you know, they affect people on an everyday level. And the fact is very few felons, unless they've done it years ago and they don't even really know the law and they go in to try to buy one. But most active criminals are not going to the gun shop to do any of this.
No.
And so the thing is if they would just take care of the laws that are on the books. Now, the problem is the enhanced gun control or waiting period that came from Charleston when that kid went into that church and shot those people. He had went and got a gun and had a 3-day wait, and they didn't give him an answer, so they had to give it to him.
Right.
And then he did have a record. He had a mental problem, obviously. So anyway, those are some laws that are coming up now.
But, you know, the thing is with that, because the records were never actually submitted to the FBI, even if the background check would have taken 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, they would have still never found that because none of the records had ever been submitted and put into the FBI's database.
Here's the thing, guys. Once they start, to really make this effective, they have to have all county, city law enforcement reporting to the FBI. They need to have medical reporting to the FBI. They need to have all these different agencies, which to me makes it really scary because that means your privacy, which is already in danger, is becoming less and less. And so that's the big thing. Now, what can you do about it? Now, down below in the description, we've got how to find your House of Representatives. We've got a lot of other information. But one of the things that I really highly recommend you do is to go to PopVox. It's something that a lot of times we don't think about. They're not a gun lobby. They're not a gun a Second Amendment foundation or anything like that. They are just a lobbying group. And just now, I went to PopVox. I put in HR 8. It came up. Only 81 people had actually. Now, a lot of times it has a lot more than that. A lot of people use PopVox, but it had 81 people. One that supported either one, and 80 that opposed it. And when I put it up, it was 82. So first off, what you do, you go there and you support or oppose, and then you can write a small letter and they'll send it to your House of Representatives or to your senators, to your specific senators. And so it's a great way to be able to come in from not Gun Owners of America, NRA, all these other people. It's a great way to come in on a more subdued way to contact your House of Representatives.
That's
and
right.
plus,
it's free. It doesn't cost anything.
No, it doesn't cost anything. I set up an account, but it was no big deal. And then, so 81 guys that support it or that oppose it and one that didn't, but that information needs to go. So it's a great tool and it's really easy to use. And that's one thing, we've become lazy about.
Well, and I think it's one of the tools that, the House and the Senate use when they're looking at a bill. They look at that to gauge what kind of interest they're going to get either for that bill or against that bill. And I think that gives them an idea of whether they should pursue it or not. If they're looking on there and they're seeing, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people opposing this on PopVox, they're going to say, I'm probably going to back off of that one and not support that because it could be a big black eye for me come midterm elections.
Yeah, especially those that are kind of doing this.
Yes.
I mean, there's some that are going to vote for it anyway. So, guys, PopVox, the link's down in the description. Just click on it. I mean, it's so easy to do. Secondly, guys, we've got to get involved with our Second Amendment advocates, whether it's Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, NRA, doesn't matter. Whatever's your choice. There's the Firearm Policy Coalition, which is a great organization. So here's the thing, guys. We'll go out and we'll spend $500 on a new gun, but we'll only send $20 to whoever. I just got on, in fact, this morning, I got on Gun Owners of America and I sent a large donation because they are in the courts. They're fighting. and they are doing a lot of great things. So,
and that Firearms Policy Coalition are the exact same
that's
way.
right. Well, Second Amendment Foundation, you know, the NRA's had some issues. There's no doubt.
I tell you, if you don't follow Firearm Policy Coalition on social media, you absolutely need to give those guys a follow. And you can see the kind of cases that they're bringing up in local, state, and federal, and even the Supreme Court, because they post almost every day with new cases that they have that are coming up.
So they need our support. It's really important. And again, guys, let's say you have 5 or 6 firearms. You could lose those firearms, or you could put money and invest into supporting our Second Amendment through these groups, because really what they're doing is the things we should already be doing.
That's
they
right.
Just make it easier.
Yep.
And they get out there and they're in the fight. So, you know, all the links are down below in the description. We've got all that listed. So it's going to be really easy for you to do. So guys, just take about 5 minutes and go through and do whatever. In fact, you know, write you a personal letter when you do your pop box or whatever, copy and paste it. And then when you send your representative an email or you call the White House, you can talk to them and use that as a, you know, a guide to go through. So all that. And I will highly recommend going over to Jared at Guns and Gadgets. Guns and Gadgets. He is great about putting out information that's current, that's happening all around. So, you know, check him out. He keeps things going on daily. All right. So that's important. We've got to stand for our Second Amendment, and, you know, and so as things come up, we're not going to talk about every bill that's introduced. We're mainly going to talk about the ones that really hit the floor, that get out of committee and they start moving.
Right.
And,
until it comes out of committee and actually goes to the floor for a vote, or is going to the floor for a vote, there's really no use in talking about it, because until it comes out of committee, it's really ineffective and doesn't mean anything.
Well, and that's when the representatives kind of see it.
Right.
Okay, let's take some questions.
Service Venator asks, picture on the thumbnail shows outside the waistband. I'm going to try and start carrying outside the waistband concealed. Any suggestions for holsters or placement?
You know, it's funny. I have not typically carried outside the waistband. I typically carry inside, but I just got the little revolver, the Kimber K6S 2-inch. It's the small. I mean, the thing's beautiful, and it's got a DeSantis holster, and so it is beautiful. It just rides really close. Now, when it gets to summertime, it may be a little more difficult, but you know, I really like that. And the one thing about leather is it kind of molds around. So typically for me, for outside the waistband, I kind of like that. But you know, there's a lot of good holsters out there. But a lot of times with Kydex, especially, it kind of comes out a little bit. I would recommend, though, if you like Kydex, to check out Stealth Gear. Stealth Gear USA. Those are superb holsters inside the waistband and out, and they seem to really ride close. Jackson Leatherwork. He's a custom leather maker or holster maker right outside of Charlotte in Concord, North Carolina. He does some really excellent work. So yeah, I've just really gotten into that, and it feels really good, and it's right there handy where I can pull it out. I like it just a little behind 3 o'clock, not a lot. I just like it a little. And it makes it really easy. Instead of reaching around, I've got it right here. I can pull it out. So, but typically for concealed carry, I do ride it in that 4 to 5 o'clock position.
Yeah.
Never put it on your back, because if you fall, you can damage your back. Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. About anywhere from 3 o'clock to 4:30 is where I like to wear mine as well.
Yeah.
Especially for outside the waistband.
Right.
Yep.
Danny Bailey asks, as a new gun owner, I'm finding it hard to train, especially with no ammo available.
Right. Right.
And that was one of the things we had just talked about a little bit earlier with training. Is dry fire training at home is a great tool. Look at getting you an airsoft. It's kind of like a little BB gun that shoots these plastic ceramic BBs. It's a great training tool that you can train with at home. That's very low cost.
Now there are laser training systems. The Strikeman, which is very low. I mean, it's very reasonable. You have an app and it has a target, and when you hit the target, it actually makes a shooting sound. That has been a really great tool for us. Also, Mantis X training systems. In fact, I'm working on a review right now with Mantis X. That is a great way to be able to evaluate your training. And I should have mentioned that a minute ago when we were talking about training. But I would look for, different training schools that might be close, and see if you can, find something. Now, right now, a lot of people are going to training classes, so it's difficult to get in. But that is one of the best ways. Or if you have a friend that is actually a good shooter that has some experience, he can at least
sight alignment, trigger control, and at least get, like you said, get you started in the right direction.
And dry fire practice. And what that means is you have your gun, you take your ammunition out, you make sure you double check to make sure it's not clear. And then when you fire it, you just pull that trigger. It helps you to understand your trigger control. It helps you with your grip. And there are a lot of resources on YouTube. A lot of guys. James Yeager's a good one. John Lovell at the Warrior Poet Society. That guy's awesome. And Mike Glover over at Fieldcraft Survival. Those are good assets.
Another really good one is Travis Tomasi.
Yeah.
He's a competitive shooter, world-class competitive shooter. He does a lot of training, and he posts a lot of training videos as well that'll really get you started in the right direction.
Jerry Parker asked, how about riding the slide with the thumb?
Well, for me, I don't keep my thumbs up. I keep them forward. And so when I've got that, I just ride it forward. Now, typically, it can cause malfunctions.
You can, yeah.
22 is the worst.
Even 9mm. If you've got a light recoil spring in the gun and you're riding the slide, you've got a lot of tension and a lot of pressure on the side of the slide. You can cause a jam with the gun. I'm like you. My thumbs are pointed at the target.
Right.
So that's where, like, if I walk around, somebody says, "Hey, what's that over there?" and they point like this, right? I point with my thumbs at the target. So my thumbs are pointed straight at the target. That helps me to get my wrist rolled forward in the correct position. It helps to align the sights, and it helps to keep my thumbs out of the way and off of the slide.
Right. And some slide releases. There are some guns that have the extended slide release that when you put it out there, and that is, again, part of training. Because once you pick up that, if you're going to carry that firearm, you're having a problem with that, you have got to adapt your grip to a better stance.
Or change firearms.
Right. Or change firearms. It's that important.
Yep.
Living Lobber asked, Such, have you ever used simunition or tried force-on-force training?
I have not had actual force-on-force training, but yes, I have tried simunition. That stuff can really hurt. It's a great way to train. Probably one of the best ways to train. But yeah, in fact, I've had a couple of invites and I just never have come out. But that is something that would definitely, if you have an opportunity to do that, I would highly recommend it. I have a lot of law enforcement friends, man. They love it, and they talk about it.
Yeah, I've done Sims training as well as a lot of airsoft training.
Right.
And a lot of your indoor ranges, a lot of your force-on-force training centers now are transitioning to airsoft because it's a lower cost alternative to the simunitions. The simunitions is pretty expensive for the ammunition and everything.
Right.
So a lot of training facilities are using airsofts instead of the simunitions for their training as well.
Right. Right. Sarah Mack's looking for something, then we're going to get right on to something else.
Wiley Guns ask, why or how would they enforce if you don't follow the transfer process, like behind the scenes?
Well, here's the thing. Let's say that you go and buy a firearm, and honestly, they're going to have a hard time enforcing it. I mean, there's not the big thing is, guys, they put these laws on the books, and then what they do is when they catch someone that's already a felon or has another crime involved, they tack that on. It's not going to help anything except it's just going to let them tack something on. So, but let's say I sell a gun to Robbie. I go out and buy it and I like it. I'm like, I don't really care about this. And Robbie goes, man, I really want that. So he gets it from me. Let's say that he has a break-in at his house and they steal it. Or let's say he has to use it in a self-defense situation. They're going to track it. And if they see that I didn't transfer it properly, especially for those that I've bought after the fact.
Right.
If you bought something, 5 years ago, you're probably going to be fine. But, the thing is, I'm a law-abiding citizen. So it's going to hurt me because I'm going to try to follow the law as much as possible, that it's constitutionally. But, I'm going to follow the law. So all it's doing is hindering me. It is not stopping anybody else. So, really, are you going to get in trouble for it? Probably not. But you could.
Yeah.
You could. And that's the problem. That's the real problem.
Well, it's making criminals out of law-abiding citizens.
Right.
Instead of punishing the criminals that predominantly use stolen firearms to commit crimes. They're not going to gun stores or gun shows and buying a gun. The majority of firearms used in violent crime are stolen firearms. Right. It's the numbers are out there. The numbers are proven.
Right.
But instead of instead of punishing these people and prosecuting these people to the fullest extent of the law because of the stolen firearm, it being used in a crime, they're wanting to punish all of the law-abiding citizens in the country and say that that makes it better. And it's just a fallacy.
Right.
It's not making anyone safer. It's not doing anything to make my life easier, your life easier, our lives better. All it's doing is making our lives more difficult and possibly making felons out of law-abiding citizens.
Well, I'll give you an example. Once they had a lot of the illegal aliens coming in, and I don't care if that's politically correct or not. If you're coming into this country and illegally, so then they would get these driver's license and they could go to the DMV. So what they did was, for us, which used to be more simple, now we have to jump through all these hoops. We got to have our marriage certificate, got to have all this stuff that we didn't have to have before. And yet those people now have gone around that and they can still get their license. So all it's done is put a burden on me. And that's what this will do. Okay.
Aaron Hine asked, so can a CCW holders bypass this if it passes?
We were just talking about that, and they don't mention anything specifically in the bill about that. But my guess would be no, because what I have read with some of the other bills that they've pushed through similar to this, or tried to push through similar to this, is it nullifies the concealed weapons permit process to be able to purchase a firearm and be able to walk out with it the same day, even though that's basically your, hey, I'm not a felon card, I can buy a firearm.
Right.
From everything that I've read, it's going to nullify that, and your concealed weapons permit won't be valid anymore for buying firearms.
Here's the thing, guys. It's not gun control. It's control. It's just control. Because if I have a concealed carry permit, it means I've been checked out. I've been checked out thoroughly. And then now I can't. That's bull crap. Okay. Let's take one more and then we're going to move on.
Show asked, does law impacting the 2A affect a state's right to bear arms law? If it has one, can a state say no to these laws to protect freedom within that state?
Yes, they can, and as if they will, the willingness to do so. There was, what was it, Missouri? There was one state that just passed a law that said they will not enforce any unconstitutional laws pertaining to guns, and they said if a federal agent is there trying to prosecute or trying to arrest someone for an unconstitutional law, what they deem unconstitutional, that they will arrest the agent or the officer. So, there's that, but a lot of times, is that going to hold up in court? Right. What's that going to do? So a lot of times it's in a gray area. Hopefully South Carolina there has been some movement here to help protect our Second Amendment rights against things like that. And so that is one thing. Like here, if you're 18, you can possess a handgun. Now you can't, because federally you can't go buy it in a gun shop, but you can possess it. My kids, as soon as they turned 18, I gave them a handgun, and thank goodness that's South Carolina law. And so my kids could carry it in their glove box, which is the way it is in South Carolina. Right. You can carry it loaded. It's right there in your glove box. But they can't get their concealed carry permit until they're 21. But in many states, you've got to be 21 to be in possession of a handgun. So you can buy a rifle at 18. So, there are things like that.
Some states are 21 for a rifle.
Right. That's right.
But one of the things that we've talked about before is get involved with your state organizations that support firearms. Get to know your representatives in your state and encourage them to submit and pass legislation for pro-Second Amendment laws in your state that will help to offset some of this.
Right.
But it's really going to come down. States' rights are going to be more and more and more important as the years go by, and we need to make sure that those states' rights are swinging toward the Constitution and not away from it.
Right. Now, we're going to stop here. I do want to mention Sportsman's Guide, $20 off every $100 or more purchase using SOOTCH, just that, not 00, just SOOCH. And you get that's 20% off. And then if you're part of their buyer's guide.
That's right. You sign up for their buyer's club, you get free shipping on everything. So you start ordering bulk items, big items, and you get free shipping on it. It will almost pay for itself with your first order.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, and we really appreciate it. We can't put a link down below. You can just put the code in. Now, let's go to triggers. Let's talk about triggers. Why is it so important to have a good trigger? Now, Robbie makes triggers. He offers, again, the flat face trigger for the Glocks. And honestly, it transforms the Glock. It'll spoil you. But one of the things about a trigger is, and I'm going to let Robbie expand on this for sure because he has more experience. But the thing is once you get a trigger, if you have a trigger that's gritty and you don't know where it's going to break, you're by the time you get to it, you're off target because you're like going, and you have to grip it and pull it. So, when you do get that really crisp trigger, it allows you to know where it's going to break. You're able to really get it down to a fine point. But like for years, shot Glocks, been shooting Glocks, shot hundreds of thousands of rounds through Glocks. That Glock trigger, I can shoot it. And it's not that bad. I mean, it doesn't really affect your trigger pull too much. But once I got one of those disconnectors,
Mm-hmm.
Is it a disconnector or a
connector?
We just finished an AR-15 build. Once you take a connector, a really good, like a ghost connector or some of those, and you put it in there, and it really makes the trigger pull better.
Mm-hmm.
I found I had a 19 with that connector, and a standard 19. I just started taking the other 19 to the range. Even though it wasn't a huge difference, I really just immediately started wanting to shoot that more.
Well, one of the big things that I've found with especially connectors is you can do a connector swap, and most of your good connectors, whether they're ours or Ghost or some of the other companies that make them, a good connector not only is going to lower your trigger pull weight, but it's going to shorten the reset.
Right.
And the reset is what is very, very important. You don't want to have to be letting all the way out on the trigger for the trigger to reset and then pulling it all the way again. When you reset, you want it to move just a little bit and reset, and then a short movement for it to fire again. Less trigger movement, you're not disturbing the sights as much as you pull the trigger, and it allows you to shoot the pistol faster and more accurately. Right. So, and that's what all of your good connectors will do for you. They'll give you that shorter reset, a lighter, smoother trigger pull that does away with a lot of that gritty feel that you get, and it's really going to help you to be more accurate and be able to shoot it faster with that shorter reset.
Now, one thing though that I want to have a little disclaimer here, because like here in South Carolina, we can put in an aftermarket trigger. They don't typically look at that. There are some states though that are a little bit more anal about, oh, well, he had this on his gun, he did that. It's according to what lawyer you get. So I just want to make a big disclaimer. If this is something you're carrying for concealed carry and you ever have to use it, there are certain states that look at that a little differently than other states. So that's just one thing to consider. But to me, you could also make the argument that you have a better trigger to be able to stay on target and not, have wild shots. Back in a few years ago, New York City, there were 3 police officers that had a guy with a gun, and they had 10.5-pound triggers, and they were terrible. And they actually ended up even shooting a bystander because their aim was so bad because of that trigger. Now, triggers are not always, we're not really talking necessarily about triggers just for handguns. Triggers for rifles as well. Mm-hmm. When it comes to your AR-15. I remember.
Well, think about it like this. Say your pistol weighs 2.5 pounds loaded. If your trigger pull is 6.5 or 7 pounds on that pistol, then it takes more weight to pull that trigger than the firearm itself actually weighs, which makes it very difficult to keep the sights aligned and stay on target while you're shooting. Conversely, rifles are the exact same way. You get a 6, 7, 8 pound trigger in a rifle, and a 5.5 or 6 pound rifle, it makes it very difficult to shoot, even off sandbags. It makes it difficult to shoot that rifle accurately at 100 yards because the weight of the trigger is actually more than the actual weight of the firearm itself.
Right. Now, a lot of times, especially with ARs, GI triggers, I can still shoot pretty accurately with them. But when you put in a really nice, clean trigger, mm-hmm. and Geisley's some of the best, Robbie, the CNCs are good.
Yep.
Timney triggers are excellent. There's a number of different ones. But what it does is I had this A2. It was a Colt H-Bar A2. And when I went and I was borrowing it from a friend, I didn't get it transferred, man. Yeah. So you couldn't even borrow a gun. You can't even borrow a gun into this bull hockey. So, but when I went to pull the trigger was just so heavy, and it just was like, And I told my buddy, I said, this trigger is horrible. You need to change it out, especially for an H bar that you're wanting to get really fine accuracy with. Now, one of the problems, though, with going with competitive triggers or going with lighter weight triggers is sometimes they are not as reliable. And so, that is one thing. In fact, a buddy of mine that does a lot of firearms training said, in fact, I think it was Travis Haley actually was talking about this. He said that he's seen a lot of problems with custom triggers in AR-15s as far as doing combat training.
It really comes down to the springs in the trigger. A lot of companies will give you a lighter trigger pull by using a lighter hammer spring. And that lighter hammer spring slows your hammer down. It decreases your lock time or increases your lock time, so it takes longer from the time you pull the trigger for the gun to fire. And then when you start getting into hard military primers, like M193 or M855, those hard primers take a harder lick to make them go off.
Right.
And with that lighter spring, then you start getting light primer strikes with your gun.
Right.
And so you pull the trigger, you get the click, then you go into immediate action drill, tap, rack, bang, clear it, pull the trigger, click. Same thing again. Maybe it shoots a couple of rounds and then you get another click. So if you're looking at an aftermarket trigger, make sure that the hammer spring that comes with it is at least equivalent to the pull weight or the weight of a stock hammer spring for an AR-15.
Well, probably most of the current triggers that are coming out right now, especially with good reputable companies, are doing. They're taking care of that. They see that's one of the great things about the internet is there's a lot of immediate feedback.
Yeah. Well, and there's companies a lot of times that may sell a trigger kit that comes with 2 or 3 different hammer springs. You get a light, a medium, and a heavy. And you need to use those springs. You may put the light in there and the light works right off the bat. You're like, oh, this is awesome. And then 500 rounds later, that spring is taking a set, and all of a sudden you start getting light primer strikes, and you're like, what's going on? Everything was working great last weekend. I go to this training class, now the gun won't run. Hammer spring is taking a set and it's wearing in, and now it's not hitting the primers as hard, and you have to switch out to a heavier spring.
Right. So getting that trigger pull, and here's the thing, guys, like when it comes with my go-to rifle, and I'll go straight to rifle. Let's say I don't have my BCM up here. I have a BCM Recce, and that's pretty much my go-to. And it has one of the enhanced GI triggers. All it is, it's been just finely polished where it breaks, and then it has a nickel boron finish to make it slick. And I think they're not that much more expensive than the standard trigger sets. Yeah. And so to me, that is my combat trigger, because I'm not going to put a really comp trigger in my go-to gun, because they're made for gaming, honestly, in practice.
And I'm a little bit different. I've got the CMC triggers in every one of my ARs. My rifle that's in the back of the car, I've got their 3.5-pound single stage trigger in it. I've been using them for 20 years, and I know that they're reliable. I know that they work, and I have a lot of confidence in them. I've never broken one. I've never had a failure with one. And I've put tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of rounds through these guns with these triggers. And so I have a lot of confidence in that trigger system, and I know that it works well.
Right. And that has a lot to do with it too. But as Robbie mentioned, you could go 500 rounds and then start having problems.
Yep.
So, it's important to make sure that you have confidence and look for feedback. That's, again, the great thing about the internet is you can see a trigger, and then you can go see what kind of feedback is happening. And then you have these guys that really take a lot, go through a lot of rounds. They're going to give feedback as well. So, it makes it really a great resource to be able to see, especially when you're counting on something for your concealed carry or for, like a go-to rifle. But now I really like, to me, that where the trigger really comes in is when I'm taking a gun out and shooting like at 1,000 yards, or we're doing that accuracy.
Yep.
And so it does make a big difference.
Yeah. The lighter trigger, like I was talking about earlier, the trigger pull is less than the weight of the rifle, and you're not disturbing the sights nearly as much when you pull the trigger.
But I did a review on that Kimber K6S, the 2-inch. And the trigger in it's a 9.5-pound trigger.
Yeah.
And it's double action only. Double action only is tough. But I still had a group that touched together. I had one that I pulled But that gun is really accurate, even at double action with a 9.5-pound trigger, but it's super smooth.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
And then when you get back where the cylinder moves and it clicks to lock, there's a stop. And you know that as soon as you touch it, it's going to break.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very predictable. So as far as real good accuracy, I like that. Now, some people like that unpredictable break. I know Jeff Cooper was really big about that.
Yeah,
I am not a fan.
I'm not either. I like to, especially with a handgun, I like to know when the trigger is going to break. And with a revolver like that, like you were talking about, it's so smooth when you're pulling that trigger. It's not, I've shot a lot of revolvers and you get that click, 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 with everything just, it's like a watch almost with everything just clicking and jerking. Oh man. And you can never predict exactly where it's gonna break in double action. And just because everything is so herky jerky and unpolished and everything in there. And that's one of the things with that Kimber revolver that really impressed me. It was like a great action job that somebody's done on a Smith revolver right out of the box.
I've never felt a trigger like that ever. I mean, and
maybe some of the early Pythons that were really hand fitted. But I mean, that's the only thing that I've ever felt revolver-wise that even compared to that Kimber as far as a trigger right out of the box.
So triggers make a big difference. I mean, they really do. And honestly, if you have a Glock, I mean, and I'm just going to give him a plug, but if you have a Glock, the flat face trigger. Now let's talk about flat face. What is the advantage of flat face? Let's just talk about that.
So what we found with the Glock triggers is the shape and everything of it. If we did a flat face versus the curved trigger, it gives you more consistent finger placement on the trigger. You get more leverage on it. We're able to radius and round all of the edges, so there's nothing sharp to bite your finger and dig into your finger. And it gives you a little lighter trigger pull because it gives you better leverage because it moves your finger down, instead of up like the factory triggers do. And then you get a nice short reset with it being an aluminum trigger, the 7075 T6 aluminum. There's no flex in the trigger like the plastic triggers. They will bend and they will flex, and you can feel it when you're pulling it. It's like the trigger, everything's just bending.
Well, I think the aluminum too, because you do have a solid point there. Mm-hmm. There's no cushion. Not that it really bent, but it's just straight back.
It is. It just comes straight back. There's no bend. There's no flex, and it gives you that very predictable break every time you pull the trigger.
Right. It doesn't give you that ding that a standard Glock does. You pull it up and it goes bang. But again, another thing about triggers is the more you shoot, the more you're going to know your trigger, but the more smooth it's going to be. Mm-hmm. With the original Hellcat, they enhanced the trigger on the new RPD or RDP. And it was funny because I've shot so much through that original Hellcat that it had the trigger had smoothed out.
Yeah.
And we had talked about the trigger compared to the SIG. We like the SIG better.
Yep.
But I think that the original Hellcat, that trigger is really
improved
out.
Over 1,000 rounds or so.
Yeah, more than that, because we've shot a couple of different things with that. So that's another thing about your trigger. The other thing is dry fire practice is going to help you. The one thing, anytime I get a new gun, the first time I shoot it, I'm always like, just a little bit of unknown, just a little bit. And so when I'm pulling it, I usually I like to fire off a couple of shots, and I feel how the trigger is going to function. I think it was Jared. What's the competitive shooter? Jared. His last name's Jared, though. He was back years ago. Anyway,
Todd Jarrett.
Yeah. Okay, so I had read a book by him one time, and it was talking about shooting. In fact, I did it on video, and people were calling me out because what I was doing was I took the pistol and I wouldn't look at the sights. I didn't focus on the sights. I focused on the trigger pull. And so I pulled it. It was a Browning high power. Mm-hmm. And so I took it. And when I pulled the trigger, I just concentrated that mental part that we were talking about with training. I just allowed for my hand to figure out how that trigger was going to break and how the recoil was going to function. And, that's one thing with the Glock 29, that 10 millimeter compact. When I took it down to the range, I was thinking, man, this is going to be a handful. It actually was not that bad. Once I shot a couple of rounds through it, I realized how the recoil was going to function. Mm-hmm. And once I did, I was able to get those points, put the leverage on it, and actually be able to shoot it pretty well. So that translates to all the different guns. One thing I do want to talk about, too, in fact, the new Springfield Armory St. Victor, It has a flat trigger, and it
A
is
lot
really
of
nice.
a lot of
They're starting to
companies
come
now
out.
are starting to release firearms with a flat trigger because they realize from seeing companies like me that have done it and been successful with a really good flat trigger. These companies look at it and they're like, they're buying those triggers are selling. This is what people's looking for, and you see more and more handguns now being released with a flat trigger because the big companies are starting to realize the benefits of it.
Right. Now, one thing I just want to talk about this. This is on the side a little bit, and it's just something that I experienced a couple of weeks ago with these ladies. One of the girls that was shooting, her husband had gotten her a Glock 42. And she didn't have a lot of experience with guns anyway. She had shot that one a few times, and she was having trouble with it limp wristing and it not functioning. And so, I was trying to work with her on that, and she did a lot better. But the gun was just too small for her. I mean, to not have experience. I mean, for me, I've got a Glock 42. In fact, it's sitting right in there. I love that. It's tiny. I can put it away. I'm a Glock guy. But for her being small, even though she's a woman and she's got smaller hands, it was still small in her hand, and when it recoiled, and so she was kind of nervous with it. She took my wife's shield, M&P shield, and she was like, oh, she had more of a grip on it. She was able to, and she shot it and loved it. And then I showed her the CZ, the M&P.
M&P
EZ.
Yep.
And it's made, especially for those who haven't had a lot of experience. One thing I've noticed with people that, they'll look at a gun, it's an unknown. There's a little bit of apprehension, and they take it and they pick it up and they don't know how to handle it, and they're kind of like, it's not like they almost like they're going to break it or something, and they're going, and, one thing about the Smith & Wesson EZ is that when you pull the slide back, it's really easy to pull back. Loading the magazine, it has a little side thing, which is not normal for your center fire, but you pull it down instead of she was trying to load at one time and she was like, this made it to where she could just pull it down and load it in. So the whole point here is, guys, make sure, and I'm talking about women, but also men.
That's right.
Make sure that you have a gun that fits you. Just the gun you have may not fit you. It may not be optimum for you. Now, in a time where it's harder to find firearms, that may be a little bit of an issue. But I'm seeing them around. You're paying a little extra for them. But one of the things is to make sure, if you have a wife or a girlfriend or a significant other, that, and I've seen this 1,000 times. These girls want to go out, and the first thing they want is a revolver. They want one of those little Smith & Wesson snubby revolvers. And then I've seen so many of those, even though I'll tell them, I'll say, I don't think you want that. No, I want that. They'll sell it. They sell it later. And so, because revolvers are very difficult to learn, as far as new shooters. And then they'll end up getting themselves a nice semi-automatic pistol.
Yep.
So, make sure that you think these things through and take that person out to a range and make sure that they are doing. And if they're having a lot of problems, bring a couple of other guns to see how they function, how they can do. Because again, something really small, it's super concealable, easy to put in your pocketbook or slip into a belly band or a little fanny pack. But if you can't shoot it, it's not going to do any good, especially if they're malfunctioning.
That's right. Smaller firearms are a lot of times built more for a very experienced shooter and not a newer, inexperienced shooter.
Right.
Newer, inexperienced shooters look at it and they're like, oh, it's so cute, it'll fit right in my pocketbook. But they don't think about the recoil aspect of it or the tiny parts. Now you're having to increase the trigger pull weight to still get the reliability out of it. There's a lot of little things that people don't consider with that firearm working properly for them as a new shooter. Now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, after they've got a lot of experience, they may be able to go back to that revolver and be like, I love this gun now. It's perfect for me.
Right.
But for a new shooter, I generally, just like you, I don't recommend revolvers because of the heavy trigger pull. It makes it very, very difficult for a new shooter to actually shoot it accurately.
Right. That's right. Okay. Well, thank you, Robbie.
Yes, sir.
We really appreciate Robbie for being here. It's 1 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and start winding down. But guys, if you're looking for a Glock trigger, and I do carry the Glock trigger in my concealed carry.
Yep.
I mean, it is the trigger. We've had a lot of experience with them. I have a lot of confidence in them. So check out WheatonArms.com. And again, we really appreciate Robbie for being here. A lot of great insight. Also, we appreciate Sarah Mack for setting everything up and bringing the questions to us. And guys, again, Sportsman's Guide. I mean, it's shooting supplies, hunting, camping, surplus, military surplus. If whether you're a shooter or a prepper or anything in between, man, they've got it $20 off every $100 or more purchase using Such, and that's it, Such. And it's funny because anytime we like Sportsman's Guide, we promoting Sportsman's Guide here. Guys, if you hear anything from us that we're promoting something, it's because it's something that we have incorporated into what we do.
That's
whether
right.
It's USCCA or rubber dummies. I mean, I love it. Speaking of training, and I got to add this in.
There you go.
And I meant to add this in. Guys, rubber dummies, rubberdummy.com. And typically I have a link, an affiliate link, and they give me a little kickback. But I've been using them for years before they did anything like that. That is on every range trip. In fact, the one we've got right now has such a big, we put, I don't know, it'll take 10,000 rounds. We probably put 100,000 rounds through this one.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because we have shot it so much and we've shot it right in the right spot that the head is starting to do this and it's falling. So I've got to get in touch and get them to send me another one. But that is one of the best training tools out there. Typically I have a link down below, and I think there's a link down there, and you get 10% off using that link. Using Such 00. So, hey, I'll just throw that in since we're talking about training, and I almost forgot. But again, we really appreciate you guys. Thanks for coming by and hanging out with us. We kind of hit on some different subjects today, which I thought were pretty important.
Yep, absolutely.
For your self-defense in a number of different ways. So be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.